my strategy writ large, if you want to just put one sort of blanket statement on it, it is buying cash flow rentals. Cash flow, passive income, financial freedom, living off of rentals, right? That's so whatever I do, whether it's new construction, I'm constructing rentals. Whether it's a syndication, I'm pooling money together to buy rentals. Whatever, right? The Freedom Fund, there is one new construction of a luxury home flip, but it's a part of an overall strategy to create passive income for the investors. So everything that I do is about rental income, which means that no, my strategy doesn't change and will never change depending on the market. My macro strategy. Makes sense? Now the micro strategy absolutely does. When I say micro strategy, I mean strategic refinances. I mean, the types of financing I put on things, the types of rentals that I actually invest in, how long I hold things. All of that is completely dependent on the market. Like these new construction homes we're building, my plan is to hold those for 10 years or more because I bought these lots a year ago when things were amazing. Now I'm in the process of finishing permitting a year later, and the construction costs have gone up and everything. It's like these are not nearly as good a deals as they were a year ago, but the 10-year horizon is still exactly as bright as it ever was, right? Because Southwest Florida, tons of people moving there, rents are going up, housing, da-da-da. So my 10-year horizon does not change with these, but my 2-year horizon absolutely is different. I might have held on to these and sold them as rentals to somebody if the market was screaming. But so that's my point. So my prediction for the coming decade, here's the good news. I literally just came back from an event where Bruce Norris, who is a famous prognosticator in Southern California, he predicted the basically all three. He predicted the crash, he predicted the boom, and then he predicted the crash. And then now he held this presentation, this day-long presentation called is it going to be 1% interest rates or a lost decade? Right now, he's focused on Southern California, but as goes Southern California, so goes the rest of the country. With the one caveat is there are tiny pockets here and there that defy the macroeconomics. Okay, so with regards to my strategy, I'm investing in the tiny pockets, and I'll get to that. But he predicted, I'll save you a 10-hour, He went through 9.5 hours of how he did it, which was incredibly informative. But then his prediction is a lost decade. And the reason for that is because you've got millions and millions and millions of potential sellers that have a record amount of equity and a record amount of savings in their savings account, right? And they have record low interest rates. So they're not motivated to sell like they would be normally. Then you have a buyer pool that is facing an increased asset price and an increased interest rate, which means their buying power is wildly diminished. So you have buyers that have no buying power, sellers that have no motivation to sell, and you've got a record amount of equity and of savings. And so you're not going to see a massive crash with lots of, markets correct whenever you have distressed sales. And distressed sales are in the form of REOs, they're in the form of repossessions and foreclosures and various things like that. You're not going to see repossessions and foreclosures because you've got a healthy job market, and you've got it with the one caveat, unless there's some kind of black swan event like a pandemic or something like that, right? But you can't plan your investment strategy based off of unlikely events like black swan events, and so you have to plan it, in my opinion, on the things that are most likely to occur. So the things that are most likely to occur over the next 10 years is we'll see a stagnation. We're not going to see a massive boom in real estate prices, and we're not going to see a crash, according to Bruce. What we're going to see is a bump along of prices with maybe modest appreciation, waiting for the wages to catch up. That's essentially what it is, because he bases it off of affordability index. And so the affordability is a product of the wages. So however much money you make determines how much house you can afford. With interest rates as high as they are, and the Fed's still trying to tame inflation, it doesn't make sense that the Fed would lower interest rates back down to 4%. So we just have to probably get used to 5, 6, 7% interest rates for the foreseeable future. And then housing prices aren't going to dramatically go down because you've got all these sellers that are not going to be selling their houses because they've got a ton of equity. And if they did sell their house, they'd be trading at 3% interest financing for a 7% interest financing on a smaller house. Who's going to do that? Nobody. So So what you're going to see is you're going to see this, essentially 10 years. He expects it to take about 10 years for wages to catch up to the point where housing prices can resume. So if that's the case, and he's been right for the last 40 years, so if that's the case, then what do? One, do you sell all your properties? Probably not, right? Because you're not going to get a premium for your properties, and what would you do with that money, right? Yeah. Maybe you sell them here and there, but for my money, I'm going to keep doing the rental thing, right? Because that's the whole point. So my strategy won't change, but I am going to focus on micro markets where they, like for instance, Southwest Florida, specifically for me, Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Lehigh Acres, Punta Gorda, and so on. So you've got all these properties where tons of people are going, or these areas where tons of people are going, tons of money is flowing, but the median house price is still has legs to run, and there's lots of areas that are still not built up. And so for my money, I'm sinking a bunch of my money into that. But that's a long-term play. That is not something I would recommend for somebody that needs to live off the cash flow. Like, that's not cash flow that I'm saying that I will even be touching for a long time, right? It's a long-term play. And then there are deals, right? I mean, the fact is that because interest rates rose so rapidly, and because there was such a long period of time where housing was just going up and up and up, it's the same thing that happened in 2008. Tons of builders, tons of flippers, tons of everybody started jumping into these things. Tons of real estate agents, tons of loan officers, all jumped into this rising market. And then whenever it dramatically impacted the market, when the Fed raised the rates so high, you had this shock effect. Well, in that shock, there's opportunity, just like Ocean's 11, right? So that's what I'm looking for, is I'm looking for those opportunities that are created because business models are failing. Right, a lot of people think that there's going to be a commercial Armageddon that's coming down because you've got commercial, right? Commercial lending is not fixed financing typically. It's typically a floating rate. Well, a lot of people bought commercial properties 4 years ago expecting at the 5-year mark that the rates would still be at 3%. Well, instead they're going to change to 7 or more, right? And all of a sudden, and also the people who are renting your commercial space no longer want to work and in an office. They no longer want to have to rent an office. They can work from home. So you've got all these,
especially the office space sector,
especially the office space sector, right? And so I'm not a commercial investor. I'm just reading the tea leaves. And so, I think there's probably going to be an opportunity in that space once you have all these rates that come due. But yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be, I'm just assuming that Bruce is right, and I think there's going to be a lost decade. So I'm not in a hurry to sell all my stuff. I've got, lots of properties with low interest financing on it. And so that's powerful in and of itself. I think because there's 60% of the loans that are out there are sub 4%. 60%, that is tens of millions, almost $100 million, 100 million loans that are under 4%. 40% of the loans out there are under 3%, which means that if you are somebody who knows how to take a property subject to the existing financing, can assume a loan, or any number of things like that, then there are opportunities for people to offload their properties, leave the financing in place. You get a great deal, they get a great deal, and then you move on. So I think there's going to be a huge opportunity in the coming years for that type of creative financing, which is why I built a creative financing arm of Whitefeather. So anyway, that's kind of where I think the future's going.
That's amazing. Yeah, and there's so much knowledge in that, and what I just want to put a exclamation point on is, number one, you're focused on the fundamentals overall, and sticking to the strategy of buying something that is going to appreciate in value long term and also cash flow. Mm-hmm. But then you look for opportunities based on what shifts that are happening in the market. And I think you're absolutely right, especially around like commercial properties. Like if there is a financial Armageddon, the person who can convert maybe office spaces into something else, that, they're buying it for pennies on the dollar, but then they can use it for something else. Blake
Repurposing.
Yeah, exactly. Blake Daly was on my podcast right at the beginning of the pandemic, and he saw this with small mom and pop roadside motels. And he started buying these because all of a sudden nobody's traveling, and these places were barely holding on, and they went defunct. So he's buying them at a big discount, converting them into short-term rentals, a lot nicer, as things started to pick up with travel, and was able to charge a premium on them and just killed it.
Brilliant.
Because he just repurposed, saw this opportunity within the market, and the fundamentals just really made a ton of sense. So
that's really smart, and those are going to be zoned already for commercial, and
exactly,
so it wouldn't be hard. But that's really smart. That's cool.
Did one in Tahoe right as they were changing the laws to ban short-term rentals, and he had this great one that's zoned as a hotel, so he can, all the competition goes away. He's got a monopoly there, and
jeez.
But so those are the types of deals that those opportunities present themselves based on the changes. I want to mention, so you might have heard a little bit difference in the recording, and that's because you are in an area where the power isn't quite as stable as in Southern California. Well, I mean, maybe in Southern California.
It's actually,
either, but you're in a different country. You're on one leg of a long journey, and it's funny because there's been a lot of guests I've had on recently who have got to financial freedom, and then they realize that they can work from anywhere, and they want to travel and see the world and experience that. So can you share a bit about where you're at right now and what the impetus was behind this journey you're on?
Yeah, it's a fantastic point. It almost feels, one of the challenges is feeling, this is for me, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, so if you ask this question, you can help me out here. I feel almost like there's nobody in charge. It's weird, right? Because I get up in the morning and I'm like, I'm going to have this call with Kirby, but other mornings, I'm like, I don't have anything I have to do, right? And so I'm waking up, and I'm in Guatemala right now, in Antigua, and I'm waking up, and the kids are waking up, and my wife's waking up, and it's like, oh, let's have some breakfast. Oh, let's go walk around town. And all of a sudden, and I'm like, it's a Wednesday. Like, this is not a holiday. This is a Wednesday at 8 o'clock in the morning, right? We don't set alarm clocks because, we don't need to. And so we just let the sun wake us up. And, so there's no alarm clock that wakes you up. There's nothing that you have to do. And it's a Wednesday. And you're in Guatemala. And it's like, there are no adults here. Like, I should be at a job. Like, I should be at home driving to work at 6:45 so that I can get to work, get my coffee, and work, right? That's it. For whatever reason, not for whatever reason. It's just because I was in the military for all of my adult life, basically, and so very rigid, very structured, and everything. And one of the interesting side effects of being financially free and living like this is it does feel a little weird. It does feel a little weird, and you're like, every once in a while, you just like get this sort of anxiety. You're like, nobody's in charge, it's so. Anyway, I felt that a couple of days ago, and it was such a weird feeling. I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, so we had this idea. When I was in the military, it was like, okay, you're in the military, you take leave, get 30 days of leave a year, and that's it, right? Maybe you get a long weekend from time to time, but other than that, there is no option. You can't just be like, oh, I'm just gonna, go traveling for a few months.
Yeah.
So my wife and I always had this dream that we wanted to travel the world. But I was in the Marine Corps. And so, you do travel the world in the Marine Corps, but it's never to a place that you want to go. It's like
Beautiful
Afghanistan. Yeah, exactly.
Welcome.
Fly Air Kandahar, So so once I transitioned off active duty, and, I worked for myself full time, we were like, okay, let's do it, right? But we didn't want to just travel. So think about a vacation, especially a 3-month vacation. That's what we're on. We're on a 3-month. My wife calls it a workcation. I'm working and she's cationing. So that's her words. So it's a 3-month vacation, if you will. But think about what a 3-month vacation normally would look like. And I thought about this, and I'm like, all right, a 3-month vacation. We're going to go to Lake Arrowhead. We're going to go up the coast to Monterey. We're going to get a camper van, and we're going to hit Paso Robles and Santa Monica and all this, and that's going to be cool. Then we're going to fly to Guatemala. Then we're going to fly to Belize. Then we're going to fly to Costa Rica, and all of that over a 3-month span. And we're not living in 4-season hotels, but we're also not living. This is a nice Airbnb. Yeah. And so that, when you think about that, you're like, okay, if that was a normal situation, it would be like, okay, I've got to take 3 months off of work. Probably can't do that. But even let's just say I could. It's not going to be 3 months of paid leave. It's going to be maybe whatever a paid leave and then a furlough or whatever you call it. I don't know, right? So that's going to take a hit on our finances. This is about a $50,000 trip, right? So you're paying for all the hotel, the Airbnbs, the camper van, the gas, the food, the air travel, all of it, right? So when you do it all, right? So number one, I'd have to save up 50 grand. Two, I'd have to take off work if they didn't fire me or maybe like not get paid for a while. And then when I got back, I would have all this work built up and I would be in a massive financial hole and my house would have just been sitting there the whole time. Mm-hmm. So I thought about that and I was like, what if we could buy a house using my VA loan, so zero down, right? Zero down VA loan, buy a house that's needs some renovation, that maybe has a guest house, and then don't have much money, so borrow the money. This was years ago. Borrow the money to renovate it, and then once it's renovated, it's going to be worth more. So I know I can do a VA cash out refinance, and for a while there, and you may even still be able to do it. You could do 100% VA cash out refinance. So like a cash out refinance of 100% of the value. That's huge. That's the VA loan that everyone, any military person that's listening to this has the VA loan. It's an incredibly powerful tool. You can buy a house with zero down. You can do 100% VA cash out refinance. You can do VA construction loan, VA renovation loan. It's crazy, right? So I bought it with a VA loan, borrowed money from a friend, renovated it, did the VA cash out refinance, pulled all the money back out. So now I have this house in Southern California with a guest house that's fully renovated. Got a pool in the backyard and everything. So we're like, instead of the house sitting there for 3 months and paying the mortgage while we're trying to figure out how to save up enough money to go on this crazy vacation, most people at that point, you just put it out of your mind. You're like, this just isn't, it's not realistic for me. So right. I'll just wait till I'm 60, the kids are off to college, and then we'll go on our cruise, right? But I didn't want to do that. And so I was like, all right, why don't we see what this house will rent for, right? So we listed it on Airbnb, we furnished it and got it all set up and then listed it on Airbnb, and it just booked up. It just booked up, right? We listed it back in like February, right? So we were like, let's see, because if this doesn't book up, then we'll just cancel the plans. Yeah. And, So it booked up over the summer, and it booked up where the proceeds that we're going to get from it exceeded the amount that we would pay for the vacation for all 3 months. And so we were like, this is crazy. Because if we were going to stay home, we'd be paying our mortgage and not making any money off this house. Instead, we're going to be traveling abroad. This house is going to be producing enough money to pay for our vacation, right? And so, and by the way, my expenses for the vacation include the mortgage. So I included the paying the mortgage those 3 months. Okay. So literally it's more expensive for me to stay home than it is to travel. And when people may think to themselves, oh, this doesn't apply to me because you live in Southern California, so it's expensive, you can rent it for a lot. Maybe you don't go through a 3-month Central America tour. Maybe you just go stay in, Big Sky, Montana for a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And instead of paying $3,000 for that vacation, you make $2,000 during those 3 weeks from your renting out your home, and now your vacation only cost $1,000. Yeah. Right? You can say, like, I grew up in East Tennessee, really poor, but I was right next to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, which is like a vacation destination. I'd never thought about going to Gatlinburg when I was a kid because we could never afford to. But let's just say I used my VA loan to buy a $180,000 house there in Knoxville, and I rented it out to college students, right? Or maybe I rented it out to people who wanted to go see UT games, right? And so maybe I rented it out for $80 a night. And then I go stay in Gatlinburg for 3 weeks while I rent it out. And instead of this Gatlinburg thing being out of reach financially for me, it's all of a sudden almost free. Yeah. You can apply it however you want. I just happen to be doing a 3-month Central America thing, right? Because so here we are, we're in Guatemala. We're a month into it. It's working so far, right? Every few days we get these deposits into my checking account from the Airbnb. And and so far it's working. It's paid for everything so far. And the only real downside is that it storms a lot here and the power goes out a lot. So
yeah, no, that's amazing. And it's so funny because we do something very similar with our property here, the farm that we live on, and people think it's like so weird. You're renting out your own house, and it's how could you ever manage that? We get bookings, like we just open up the time that's convenient for us, and nobody can book last minute. Nobody can book automatically. We have to approve the people. We can screen them, have conversations. So if we're going to be gone anyway, like, a couple weekends on Memorial Day weekend, we were going to be gone anyway. We're going out to my brother's lake house, so we rented our back barn and our main house out. Made $3,500 over a long weekend while we're doing what we were going to do anyway. And so these are the things that can get you to a place where you don't have to rely on that W-2. So you just have to be a little bit creative about it. And I love what the way you just laid that out. That's the recipe right there.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, dude, think about this. So how often a normal American, how often are they, out of a 24-hour period in a day, what percentage of that are they actually using their car? For the average American, it's way less than 5%. For some people, it's less than 1%. Because think about it. Even if you drive to and from work, you're probably driving less than an hour total, most people. Now, especially people working from home, in a week, you may use your car a total of an hour out of an entire week. So your car's just sitting there, but you're making payments on it. So, or you own it free and clear, and it's not making you money. So you can use my car right now. My Tesla is listed on Turo. And what I do is I just rent it out, and people will pay me $50 to $150 a day to rent the car, right? So like think about it in terms of, if you are able to rent your car out, you're turning that liability into an asset. At the very least, it's paying for itself, and you got a free car. But you may be able to turn it into an income stream as well. But let's just say you take it a step further, and I love this exercise, and you want like that. I have a Performance Model S Tesla. It's been my dream car for the longest time, but it was way too expensive, right? I was like, I'm not going to, whatever. But think about it. Like, let's just say the loan payment is $1,000 a month or $1,100 a month or whatever, which actually that's less crazy now that cars are ridiculous than it was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, that was an unimaginable number, right? Yeah. And it's still expensive. But let's just say you can only afford $300 a month for your car, but you desperately want your dream car. And let's just say your dream car is that Model S performance version, which is more expensive. But you can only afford $300. What is $700 a month? Like, let's just say it costs $1,000 a month. What is $700 a month? It's what? Do the math. It's $25 a day. So let's just say you're able to rent it out for $50 a day, and you only rent it half the month. The other half the month you drive it. Well, now you have a Tesla Model S that you pay $300 a month for.
Right.
It's that simple, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say if you need a car and you don't have the money to pay for a car, then get one that has, zero down and no payments for 2 months. And then rent it out on Turo and build up enough money to have it pay for itself. You can get yourself a free car.
Yeah. And I think the reason you've had so much success is because that's where your mind goes. It goes like, here's the opportunity. This is how it can work. And I think there's so many people that will listen to this, and the first thing their mind goes to is, well, somebody else is driving my car. What about insurance? This isn't going to work. Like, what if it doesn't get rented? You've got so many people with that mindset. And of course, you can, it's not going to be just blue skies and sunshine the whole way. There's going to be obstacles, roadblocks along the way, but conceptually, over time, it will work. And at the end of it, you've got a car that was used a lot more than it would have been, but you have paid out. You didn't pay for it. Somebody else paid for it, and now you own an asset. You own a car that has some value. Exactly,
and that's the real question, right? Is sure, if you adopt a mindset of here's all the obstacles, this is why it can't work, then I can't do anything for you, right? You got to change that mindset at least a little bit in order to open up. Robert Kiyosaki says it really, really well. He's like, don't say I can't afford something. That shuts down any possibility. Say, all right, how can I afford it?
Yeah.
How can I get a free car? And then your brain opens up to the possibilities of what is possible. And maybe you do find out that it's not possible for you, but at least you went through the exercise. 99 times out of 100, though, you're going to realize that it is possible for you. And all you have to do is, do what it takes to get there. And so that's the question, is like, if you're working a 9-to-5 job and you're barely making ends meet, and I tell you, I will give you, and let's just say your car is about to die. And I say, hey, Kirby, you know what? I have a car that's slightly used, but you know what? I'll give it to you for free. Are you going to say, oh, no, I don't want a car somebody else has driven? Yeah. No, right? That's essentially the same thing as saying, oh, well, I don't want somebody else driving my car, so I'm not going to rent it on Turo, right? Yeah. Or I don't want somebody living in my house. It's like, really? Like, your house doesn't care. Your house has no feelings whatsoever, right? So if you have things that you value, and Kimberly and I went through this, my wife went through this exact same thing when she was like, oh, I don't feel comfortable with people living in our house. I'm like, okay, first off, anything that you really value that you think might be broken, we'll put in the garage and we'll lock the garage, right? Everything else is just stuff. It's a chair. It's, you know what I'm saying? Like, it has no magical powers. You literally sit on the thing and it doesn't care whether you're sitting on it or not. And if somebody breaks it, guess what? That's what the security deposit, that's what the insurance is for. So I kind of hope people break our stuff, because if they do, I get new versions of that, right? And anything that's irreplaceable is not accessible. And it's like, oh, I don't want somebody sleeping in my bed. All right, first, you know that there's a cleaner that goes in there and cleans everything, right? So like, it's not like you're gonna go into that bed after somebody has just gotten out of it. They're gonna clean everything. Exactly. And if you're really freaked out about the concept of someone sleeping on your bed, just take your mattress out, put it in the garage, get a rental, buy a mattress that is only for your Airbnb, and that way no one has slept on your mattress, right? There are ways to overcome the emotional barriers, but that's what they are. They're just emotional barriers. But you know what's awesome? What an awesome emotion is? Being financially free and feeling like you can travel the world, and I'm actually financially incentivized to vacate. I'm financially incentivized to explore Central America with my family because we got over the emotional hurdles of people living in our house.